Hello, my name is John Brink, and we are on the Brink in downtown Prince George, the capital of northern BC, the most beautiful place in the world to live, at least in my mind. And we have a special guest and a friend, Tracy Calogheros. Tracy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, we have known each other already for quite a while.
Very long time. We're getting up to 30 years, I think.
That long? Oh my God!
I know, I'm feeling old.
Yeah, and you're a very active individual. So am I, and we don't always get time to say hi, hello. Maybe hi, hello, but not much more. So this is an opportunity for me because you have such an interesting past and present, and I'm sure future that I thought it would be a great time to have you on our podcast and tell us a bit about you. So starting with that. Tell me a little bit about your past, from where you were born, if you want, and all of that sort of thing that brought you then along the line to Prince George.
Sure. I was born in Toronto. I'm a 1969 baby, so you can do the math, but I'm getting up there in years. And I went through regular art school at York University, and it was around 1992 that they started putting razor wire up around an elementary school behind the apartment I was living in, and I thought, I don't think I want to live here and raise a family here. So I looked at a map. I'd never been out west. Prince George was in the middle, so I thought, all right, we'll start there.
Simple as that, eh?
Simple as that. Loaded up a cube van and came out, had nowhere to live and no job, and a week to figure out how to at least find somewhere to live so I could return the van.
When was that, Tracy?
November 25th of 1992, I moved here.
1992. Was it cold here then and snow?
It was definitely cold and snowy. Coming down the hill on Highway 16, I was looking at the bowl, and it was one of those beautiful clear blue days.
Were you on your own?
I had a boyfriend at the time and a friend of his and a van full of animals. We brought dogs and cats and a ferret with us. It was a very strange time.
Oh my goodness. And so that was in what year again, you said?
92.
92, and so no job and no place to stay. So what happened then?
Well, we landed, found a place to rent. I actually worked for a while at, those that have been here a while, I was a waitress at the Village Pandora here in town.
Yeah.
And then I did a stint at Prince George Printers and wound up doing some volunteer work at the SPCA. And it was from there that I landed into the museum at my job there in 1994.
You have this thing about animals then, right? Because you had a number of animals with you when you came from out east. Mm-hmm. And is that something special to you or in your life?
Yeah, animals have always been a key piece of just my home life and of my interests. As a little kid, I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian, and I'll tell you that a lot of the work I do in the museums world ends up landing me at zoos and aquariums. And I just feel like animals have a special place in people's hearts, and they are unique in educational circles. Animals are some of the best ways to reach people and get them engaged in whatever the story is that you're trying to tell.
I react to that because we're very much into animals. 3 dogs, 2 cats, and 10 horses, and all of that kind of stuff. You know, so they are very much part of life and very important to us, at least. You know, so into my.
No kidding. These days we could all learn a lot from animals and their willingness to trust and to work together.
And I also ride horses, English dressage, you know, so it's just...
I took English as a kid.
Yeah, you did, eh?
Yeah, just having a conversation about switching over to reining and how there's so much similarity between reining and English dressage.
Yeah. So you still ride now sometimes? Or
Not lately, I have. Yeah. My daughter took up riding for a while, and Sherry and Dennis were great. They were teaching her, and so they took me under their wing and tried to convert an English rider to being a Western rider, and I really enjoyed it. But time is of the essence, and that's the problem for me.
And the same for me, actually. So you have one daughter? Or?
I have a daughter and 2 sons.
And 2 sons? Mm-hmm. And then... I asked you the question because I pretty much know the answer. Do you have a husband?
I certainly do.
Has he got the same name as me?
John Calogheros, though, not Brink.
No. I meant the first name.
Yeah, John's in at the museum too. We met there, got married there.
Is that right? Mm-hmm. So when was that? When did you meet him? And was that during the first time that you got your first job there?
No, actually, my predecessor, George Phillips, who used to be the director at the
I
museum,
remember that, yeah.
he hired John to stick handle our renovations that were in 2000, actually. And
Yeah,
then John
that was fairly major too then.
Yeah, it was huge. That
But
was
such a beautiful building, right? Right in the Lheidli T'enneh Park.
It is. It's Anthony Bonney was the architect in
Yeah.
2000, and he has come back to help us with the renovations we're doing right now. So
Yeah.
it looks great. I'm pretty excited about the new exterior work that we're doing on that building. It's such an important piece of Lheidli T'enneh Memorial Park.
Yeah, and the other part about the region in a general sense, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, but there's a lot about this museum, and very, very excited. I'm very excited about it, and I'm sure so is the community, that when it officially opens later on this year, and I've driven by there several times, and it's amazing what is being done. It's such an important part of the infrastructure of the region, to have a museum like that alongside with the university, the college, swimming pool, and all the other things that makes the North and Prince George in particular. A little bit more that I want to know about. You've been very active in a lot of other things as well.
I have.
Tell me a little bit about that, because you've been involved in the community, you've been involved in tourist Prince George, and
Yeah, I guess I'm not very good at staying focused on one thing.
Right.
So, when you're looking at an organization like the museum, it has its fingers into so many different things going on in our community. And by extension, I wound up having the opportunity to get involved. So,
Yeah.
Yes, I set up the Society Papers for Tourism Prince George. I've served on the Northern BC Tourism Board at various times.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to get involved in the 2015 Canada Games, both at the bid stage and at the host
which were
society.
major, right, for the region.
Huge
Yeah.
difference. And when you look at some of the real significant changes that are happening, in some ways, just in our own self-image here in the North,
Yeah.
the Games, I think, are one of the key changing points in
No
that.
question about that.
And of course, I ran for office for the federal Liberals a couple of times.
Right.
So I've been involved in politics. It really started years back.
How did you get into politics, of all things?
Well, I don't believe in sitting on the sidelines, as you may have guessed.
Yeah.
And I think that
Walk
if you're...
the talk.
You got it. If you're going to complain, you need to get involved. And
Exactly.
I think I have some ideas that could be of use. So my interest in politics stemmed from what I learned about the impact that politics at all levels have on community organizations like museums.
No
And then you
question
start
about
to
it.
extrapolate that out
Yeah.
into policy. And there's not enough Northern voices at those decision-making
Exactly.
tables in Victoria or Ottawa. So
Exactly.
I've definitely got a voice. So I decided to use it and got involved.
So then you ran as a candidate for the Liberal Party twice or three
Twice.
times? Twice. And now that's an experience all in its own, right?
You aren't kidding.
And the only one that somebody can really relate to it is somebody that has ran, for candidate or for nomination or for the seat. I did it in 2001
That's right, you did.
against my enemy. No, I'm just joking. My best friend, actually, Shirley Bond, who, her and me, we ran, for the BC Liberals in the Prince George Valemount riding, and we were the only two candidates. She won, it was an interesting experience.
It is.
So
It changes your perspective
Oh,
on what you can do, what the roles are, and how the community treats you.
And then the other part is being part of a campaign is very involving and very delicate, and all the other things around it, So it's a whole different experience, and certainly one that I'm thankful for being involved. Before that, I already was, since the early 80s, I think I was the riding president for the Socrates in Prince George North. And, and I'm kind of proud of that, because that was during the time that we got the concept of a Northern University started, and then it finally did happen, obviously, and in the late 80s, 90s, but all of that was all part of that, and you being around that, when you bring issues forward politically, it's quite a process, and so it's quite an experience.
Did
So
you find that when you ran unsuccessfully that it didn't matter whether you were successful or unsuccessful? You still wound up, it's like you've given up your private life. The public still comes to you looking for leadership and advice and access.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found the same thing. It's interesting to me.
Yeah, so obviously what it meant, the decision was just like you said, because I already was involved in politics before, because I was the writing president for well over 10 years, and or longer actually, and so I wanted to be involved, right? So and then we did a lot of interesting things, including the university and all those kind of things, and then at some point the point gets to, well, you want to walk the talk, or you're going to just sit back and wait, right? So then I put my name up, and and that was quite an experience, because here you are, and you open up the closet with all the good, the bad, and the ugly. But fortunately, I'm not saying that I'm that good, but there was nothing there were no major things that. But it's quite an experience, and then obviously being challenged, and then public meetings and all of these kind of things happen in that process, right? And then. I didn't like losing necessarily. Who
Nobody does, yeah.
Yeah, and but I was quite okay with it, and then Shirley was obviously a fantastic candidate. And has done
Shirley's been
fantastic
great.
job.
I think it would have been an interesting, different 20 years to have seen you in that role, because I think you would have been great too.
Yeah. That's what I thought. No, I'm just joking. Anyway, Shirley will be.
We'll solve all the problems of the world between us. Yeah.
She will be my guest in the next couple of weeks as well. So but in any event, so you did that part, but then you ran once, and then you ran again, and obviously you knew already a lot more the second time around, and then it's a tough battle, right? To especially in this region, and I don't want to turn this into politics necessarily, but it's so settled in certain areas, and it's a big riding, right?
Yeah, physically, it's a large chunk of geography to try and cover all of it. And the 2015 election was the longest one in Canadian history, so of course, jump in.
How long was the actual campaign?
Oy vey, I've forgotten now. It was 3 months that I took a leave from the museum, and we did a lot of covering the ground. It was just John and I doing it on our own for the most part. Second time around, we had more help from the party, but it wasn't the same experience. I liked it better, actually, when it was John and I on the road talking to people.
Yeah. And then it's a major commitment to your life, because everything will change, right?
Yeah.
So so you did all of that, and then you went back to the university, but in the meantime, you've always had a presence in the community and in the region. You always stayed proactive.
Yeah.
And then the other thing about you that I think that because of all the time that you have been here, but the other part, you're an outdoor individual, right? And so likely is John, so that and then I tell my guests that that are watching our podcast from around the world, actually, that Prince George is the center of, as you already mentioned, of British Columbia. British Columbia is a big province, we are about 500 miles or about 800 kilometers north of Vancouver. And then probably another 800 kilometers further north is the border with the Yukon. And then east and west is another 800. And, so we are in the middle. Now, Jerry Thiessen, the mayor of Vancouver, would say, no, we are. Okay, we'll give him that. But we together are.
The middle's big.
Yeah. And then the other part about Prince George, which is so unique, and we're sitting here downtown Prince George. When I came here in 1965, Prince George was a boomtown. So it was booming, and a job could be had in a half an hour. And George Street in particular, there were lots of bars and lots of cafes, and and the normal conversation would be, when did you get here and when are you leaving? So obviously things have changed dramatically. They're probably, I've been all over the world, so have you likely, is that I cannot think of a place that has more combination and balance of all seasons. Although spring is a little bit slow this year, but normally it has all of that, and that has all the lakes. We have thousands of lakes here within 50 kilometers from around us, and then so much nature. I drove down the road a couple of days ago, and then there was a black bear on the road, just virtually downtown Prince George, and deer and moose, and so there's still so much wildlife, and at the same time, Prince George has matured into a community that has the best small university in Canada. Mm-hmm. Then we have an amazing college of New Caledonia that served the entire region of northern BC, and then in Prince George indirectly has a leadership role in northern British Columbia. I call it the capital of northern British Columbia.
Yeah, I don't think that leadership role is indirect at all. I think that as Prince George goes, so goes the north, and that there's, we're not just a service center, but you hit it on the head with the access to the outdoors. There is just nothing like this community with the level of urban amenities and that immediate access to wilderness. And it's true wilderness. It isn't managed forests or groomed parks. We have those too.
Yeah.
But to be able to, I live at Tabor Lake. I'm 12 minutes to work on a half acre looking at a mountain and water. And my cabin is another 2 hours from here at Francois Lake, where again, it's incredible wilderness. We've had grizzly bears and you name it on the island. Yeah. So there's nothing like this.
Yeah, and for a family to grow up in a region like this,
100%.
is because it has virtually everything, and then from a career perspective, it's still very much growing and it's very active. To my friends further south from us, I tell them a lot of times that do not forget, northern BC generates probably 80% of the GDP in the province of British Columbia. So don't forget it, and but it's amazing, and so.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I can't imagine living anywhere else now. Having grown up in southern Ontario, in the suburbs outside of Toronto, and vacationed all over there, I tell people now, you'd never get me out of here with a crowbar. I absolutely love this place. Yeah,
and especially after all the things that happened with COVID, and that's still lingering somewhat, but still that kind of living in a beehive area where so many people so close by. Mm-hmm. I kind of appreciate Prince George every day of the week.
Yeah, the geography has protected us for so many reasons, but the elbow room that we have up here is just until the rest of the world realizes how good we've got it. You watch the exodus coming out of the major urban centers since COVID, and people are looking at markets like ours, and that's where you see the housing boom and just the growth.
All of that.
But we've already got the cultural amenities. We've already got the established post-secondary and medical and all the rest of it.
And look at the swimming pool right
behind us. And looking at the swimming pool right behind you. You got
it. Major swimming pool. So it has the infrastructure, and we've been very fortunate with good leadership, both regional and the community, and this mayor and council. They have done a very, very good job. In particular, showed that when there were difficulties in 2018, 2019, when we had forest fires that were very, very major, and a lot of people had to evacuate and were welcomed into Prince George, and all the communities pulled together, and that kind of showed how close they are together, and especially in times of difficulty and adversity.
I think people make the place, and that's why the work that I've been doing for these last 28 years at the museum is meaningful work, because it's all about people and a place.
Exactly.
So if you're talking about the value in Prince George, whether it's our contribution to the GDP or the access to the wilderness, none of that makes a particle of difference if the people are no fun.
Exactly.
But this community pulls together, and this community believes in itself and in each other, and if you have a breakdown or an issue, someone's going to help. You never have to worry that you're not going to have enough hands to run an event, or to be able to I don't know, express an opinion
Yeah.
that is going to be heard beyond our own community. This isn't a very special place, but it's because Canada's a special place.
Well, it is, yes. There's no place like it in the world, in my opinion.
I'm with you 100%. That's why we get along.
Yeah, and then, the other thing about Prince George, it was incorporated in 1914, started virtually as a small little community by the river, and only 110 years later, look at it now. And then look at it as we go forward. There's no question in my mind that it will grow sizably too from where we are today. And hopefully that's a good thing as long as we keep it well balanced, So the other thing, what I want to talk to you about in particular as well is that you've managed now the Exploration Place Museum for about 28 years. It virtually started in that time that you became involved in it, and that it had a major rebuild in 2000-ish, and and now obviously it's in the process of completion. That should be complete hopefully in September. That has not only, which I have seen, others have seen, the exterior, still this amazing location, the Lheidli T'enneh Park, is that it looks beautiful, but inside, virtually all the areas that you have and the specialties that you have all have been changed as well and updated, right?
100%.
Now, at one point there was a fire. Did a lot of things get damaged then?
Everything was lost. So that was 1976.
Yeah.
The museum had really just finally built their first permanent home and opened it up. And it was that winter. The trucks were unable to get into the park because there had been too much snow and they couldn't get in, and they essentially watched the log building burn, and the entire museum collection went up with it, with the exception of the taxidermied animals, which had been pulled out for cleaning for the winter. So there's a large grizzly that anyone's been through the museum has seen standing on his hind legs.
Yeah.
He's one of the few that survived that fire in the 70s.
So a lot of stuff was lost. So how did you then, from there on in, that happened in 76, and obviously then when you became involved, 20 years later, so 25 years later, then you were still in the process of rebuilding the history. So where did you source and get all the things?
Yeah, it was a blessing in disguise in some ways. Losing the irreparable collection was, there's nothing you can do to change that.
Yeah.
But as anyone who's ever tried to jettison their own personal collections, that feeling of freedom that comes when you're not carrying around a mountain of stuff, it's not a good thing for a museum to start that way, but all through the 80s, it became a process of the museum doing some soul searching. What do we want to do? How do we want to interpret the history of Prince George and of the region? And so because it was a blank slate, it freed up the people through the 80s and the early 90s to really revision what they thought was going to make sense. So there was a large photographic collection that came in through the city, the Wally West photo collection, that had a basis in the Simonson glass negatives from the earliest days of post-contact settlement.
Now, Wally West had a shop on 3rd Avenue.
He did, Shadows and
Operated
Lights.
there for years and years and years, and was well known.
He was designated a Canadian master photographer, which is a very rare designation, and we had him right here.
Amazing. Yeah.
So that became sort of the core nugget of the historic collection, which then meant that what we were doing was telling stories based on images. The director, George Phillips, who came in 1992, started to look to natural history as a key component of how to fill the existing 12,000 square feet of galleries that they had then. They opened the Explorations Gallery in 1994, and that was the same month I started with the institution as their marketing and graphics person. So I was building exhibits and doing the talking to the community about what the organization was. We started to take in some live animals, and the hands-on science approach started to really take off, and the community bought back into an institution that really had massively damaged trust given the loss of the entire collection in the 70s. because we didn't have a massive physical collection, it also changed our approach to being about relationships. And the relationship that we built with the Lheidli T'enneh starting in the mid-1990s is unique, not just in the province, but in the country. For a non-Indigenous cultural institution to work so closely with a local First Nation as we have, it has paid dividends well beyond exhibits in the galleries.
Right.
Those relationships not only have informed the development of the museum and the way we tell stories, and we have learned a lot sitting at the feet of the elders, but it has also provided an entry point for the Lheidli T'enneh in many cases into other aspects of the non-Indigenous community that's developed here in the North, right at a moment when the entire world is waking up to the loss of Indigenous communities and wisdom and contributions that has happened because of that colonial approach that predominantly Britain imposed on the world. So again, I loop back to this idea that a museum has a role in its community far beyond simply warehousing collections. Yes, that is the nugget of the work that we do. We collect and we hold these in safekeeping in perpetuity. But beyond that, there's no point in having a collection if no one sees it or no one uses it or no one cares that you're holding it. So it's so much a piece of creating a relationship with the community that I am not at all certain would have happened if we had been carrying around the lodestone of a colonial collection of cork boots and crosscut saws. We have those things, and we've found some of those objects in the years since the fire. But I think if we had been carrying a pioneer collection, it would have really limited the freedom of the museum to think about itself in a whole new way. And we're now being held up provincially and nationally as leaders because we have taken these different approaches to interpretation and storytelling.
I'm sure it would not have happened because it would have been so entrenched in what it already was. It already had the identity then. And although it was very, very unfortunate what happened, but because of that, it Goku Renew at a very critical point, I believe.
I'm with you.
Yeah, in particular to understand and mutually with the Indigenous community together and the people that not only in the region but in the province, because I was born in Holland, and Holland has a history of hundreds and hundreds of years. What we have here, when I first came here in the 60s, if you met somebody that was born here, you would say, my God, you must be one of the only three. So then, because there were not many people here that really were then born here.
Well, there weren't that many non-Indigenous people here that weren't born here then.
Exactly. And obviously, the Indigenous people have been here for a long, long, long time. Mm-hmm. But so then for the whole community to mix closer together and get to know each other, obviously the Lheidli T'enneh and all the things that have happened with the park and the museum highly contributed to that in terms of bringing them closer together, especially these days, it's very, very critically important.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that had we been the traditional city museum, there would have been no appetite to look beyond that colonial approach to museological practice.
Yeah.
But because we couldn't be that, we had that opportunity to look past what museums traditionally had been. I've heard that said so many times. Well, when you moved here, it was always, well, were you from here? Were you born here? No one was born here.
Yeah.
But that to me illustrates how segregated the two communities were.
Yeah, no question.
Because the Lheidli T'enneh have been here in excess of 9,000 years, and their ancestors before that.
Yeah.
So to me, it was very telling, because I heard exactly that. In the early 90s when I moved here, that's how people talked about the population of Prince George.
Because there was no interaction, right, between them. Right?
Absolutely.
So the closer they become together, the more they are alike rather than the opposite,
I had a gentleman ask me this morning about the train rail and how it crosses in Prince George. And, that was all about the development of Prince George. That's what brought people here. And I had to correct him and say, well, actually, no. Prince George has always been a meeting place, this physical geographic space.
Yeah.
But it's about a crossroads of rivers and a crossroads of trail and a crossroads of all sorts of things. The geography drives the settlement,
Yeah.
but the settlement is not limited to post-contact white folk.
Exactly, very correct. The other thing that I always think has such huge potential here, I hope, is that for the people that visit us in the north more and more all the time, is that how can they learn more about the history around us? One of them is the museum, no question about that. One of the other ones is all the nature that we around here, the park and the lakes and all the other things. But the other part that I always believe would be interesting, and I've talked about that for the last 20 years, is that if you look at the museum, equipment museum, that at one time in the early, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, all the history around here in terms of industry. And the other part is that in the park that we have, we can virtually see it from here. So if we already have that, and we can do more, and then to have close by, which in the same area, if we had an area from where, as you walk in through the gate, you're now at 2010, the way things looked here then, including First Nations on the ground, not only in pictures, but replicating precisely what you said, is that the history, First Nations for in excess probably of 9,000 years, how did that all look before Prince George was Prince George? And that, so that's always what I kind of visualized, is that we have one part is the equipment and some of the mill equipment they used to use, and that's all good, but we can go beyond that in the same region to have the opportunity, no different than Barkerville, again, in terms of time, it goes far beyond that, but to have something here that we could stop, walk through these gates, and all of a sudden, where we are in the 1900s or beyond. And get an idea of what it then looked like. And that would be a point where it makes people stop, not only enjoy Prince George because of all the other things that we already talked about, but also in terms of the history in particular, because of the history museum as one part. And I can see that we will at some point go further than that in terms of being physically walking through it, right?
Yeah, there's always that sort of in situ, immersive, historic approach. They're challenging for a variety of reasons. I would encourage people to think about coming down and riding on the Dinky engine in Lheidli T'enneh Memorial Park. If you wanted a physical experience with history, that 1912 Dinky engine is a legitimate artifact, and it's the only one left in North America still plying the rails. So
yeah, I didn't know that.
It's pretty neat. It's also Canada's shortest railroad.
Yeah.
So it's different than an amusement park ride. This is a 6-ton wood-fired steam engine, and it built the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway.
Amazing, So when is the museum opening? If you got a date, or is it September?
I haven't got a date. I'm pointing at the fall, so I'm aiming for September. Yeah.
So that's the goal, and then if all things go well, and then which is an amazing time, and it will be quite different from what it was before, once you, not only from the outside, but as you walk into it.
Oh, without a doubt. We haven't left a single gallery untouched. And for those that have been around a while, we put in that motion simulator in 2000 into the Cimex gallery. That's now been converted to a teaching kitchen, which is going to have some incredible opportunities for the city to participate, not just in adult cooking classes, but kids, populations at risk. And I'm pretty excited about what we're going to be able to do with that teaching kitchen.
So the museum will keep you very, very busy, you and John. What are your children's names? You have one daughter, 2 sons?
That's right. So Tiani is our daughter. She's the oldest. And then...
How old is he?
She is 27.
Is he in the region here, or is he?
She has all three kids are living here.
Yeah.
And T'enneh actually just decided that she wants to really lean hard into her artwork. So she's doing some work on Twitch, and she's doing private commissions, drawing
She's an
characters
artist.
for people. Yeah, she is.
And what does she do? And
She's not working at the moment.
no, I meant in terms of artistic.
Mostly digital paint.
Okay.
So there's she's experimenting now with coding and moving into developing some gaming
Nice.
type work. And our youngest son Jake is also moving that direction. His artwork is more sculptural generally, though he's moved more into digital paint over the last couple
Where
of
did
years.
you get the art thing from?
Well, you know, I think that T'enneh and Jake are my stepkids, and their mother is a very artistic person, and so is their father, John. He also is extremely artistic. I'm the one who took art in school, but I'm an above average doodler. I had a prof tell me years ago that I should really consider arts administration, which I took to mean my art stank. So I'm not going to claim any of the credit of the kids' skills.
Yeah.
But that's where that's all coming from for them.
Right. Now, the other thing that I noticed is that you got an award, the Governor's General Award.
Mm-hmm, the
So
museum.
what is that?
So the museum and the Lheidli T'enneh were jointly awarded the Governor General's Award for History.
Okay.
And
It's federal.
it's a federal award, yeah.
Quite prestigious.
Very prestigious.
Yes.
We've never won anything like that in the
No.
past. And in this instance, it was for the Memorandum of Understanding that we signed in 2016 with
Yeah.
the Lheidli T'enneh, where we repatriated our entire collection of material culture that we were holding because we felt it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Signed the MOU, handed the entire collection back to the Lheidli. They, in response, said, "This is great. We trust you now. We believe you. Will
Yeah.
you be our repository?"
Yeah.
So then they made us the official home
Perfect.
for their material culture.
Yeah.
But it was that act of trust on both sides that
Yeah.
cemented that relationship. And it took us 15 years to get to that point.
Yeah.
So the Governor General's Award,
Became an example
that's right.
of what it can be, right?
And that was to acknowledge that unique relationship.
Yeah.
I really can't emphasize enough how important the relationship component of what the work is that I do
Yeah,
has
I
always
agree.
been.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're still young compared to me.
You're in better shape.
I don't know about that. Yeah, I'm trying to be. So so health is one of the most important parts, right? And staying healthy, physically, mental. And then I write books, one a year, I hope.
I heard you've got a new one coming out.
It's coming out July. It's ADHD Unlocked. And
That'll be a good one.
it's a good one, because I have had so many people say to me, it happened. I think we were in a thing at the winery actually, where we were invited to be guest to about 16 different individuals from across Canada, and to kind of talk about the forest industry, but also other things. And so I was sitting next to two individuals, and as we talked, they did a lot of research. Actually, I was surprised. He said, "I saw your book." I said, "Oh my God!" And I told him about the other book. And then he said to me, "I haven't told anybody that." He said, "I was diagnosed with ADHD. I haven't told anybody." I said, "No." Yeah. And he was probably in his late 30s, maybe early 40s, and quite successful. And, so it gave me an opportunity to speak there. And then I took the liberty, because he told me to, as I talked about some of the other things other than just lumber, also about ADHD in the book that I was doing, and say, for example, I talked to Andrew, who confessed to me that this was the first time that he said to anyone that he was diagnosed ADHD. And he was sitting there, he said, "Yeah." He said, I didn't know that you were going to tell everybody, but I said, "You told me. It's something to be proud of."
It's not a secret, yeah.
Yeah, so in any event, yeah, I did, so it comes out then, and I'm quite excited about it. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to reading it. And it's funny, on that same theme, I was diagnosed at 2 years old as hyperactive. So in that era, they didn't have ADD or ADHD. So I've decided I've turned it into a superpower, and I will just function with it. But
I think as you already noted, is that I was same as you said, attention and hyperactivity and all of those things in combination. I failed grade 3 once, and then I failed grade 7 3 times, and that's the time they took me out of school and said, well, what do we do with them? I was 14. Do we send them to the mentally challenged school, or do we get them a job? So they got me a job, and I became a furniture maker.
Well, there's no question that you don't have, a mental deficiency in terms of being able to deal with the traditional school work.
Yeah.
But in our era,
yeah,
for sure, they didn't know what to do with children who were neurologically divergent, and
still so, Tracy. Like even now, much better than it used to be. But the stigma is still there to a certain
100%.
extent. And the time that I picked up a book, and books on food actually, and I looked at the book. I don't know why I did it. I was looking at it, was Driven to Distraction, and which I normally don't do, I looked at it, and all of a sudden I said, oh my God, that's me. Mm-hmm. And I wrote it in Dutch, and now I finally know who I am. And I looked at the book at least for a half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, until the guy that owns the store said, well, are we going to buy it or what? Anyway, I bought it. And it's kind of funny now, because they're selling my book. They are now, this one and the other one, they will as well.
That's kind of cool, actually.
Yeah. And, that I view it as a superpower. Superpower in the means that I can do a whole lot of things all at the same time, more so than, with all due respect to other people, but that works for me, and it always worked for me. But it took me till I was 57 years old to see that book. Then, before I talked to, really, other than my wife about it, I talked to my doctor about it 5 years after that, when I was 63, and he was a friend, but I was ashamed of it. So I went to his office, and I said, he said, how you doing? I said, I'm good. Yeah. So I said, well, then the next way, why are you here? Because they seldom go there. And then I said, I think I got ADHD. And he said, why? And so we went through that together, and he said, I think so too. And then it took me another 4 or 5 years, then I thought, should I, again with him, should I take medicine for it? Mm-hmm. And he said, well, maybe Adderall. Now I know this can be quite addictive, apparently. So he gave me a bottle of 100 pills. I used 3 of them. I still got them in my drawer. I think it was 2008. Mm-hmm. So that's 14 years ago. And so I only used 3 and never used any others. But I found that I had to write about it. I had an obligation to write about it. Not only that, but also PTSD, because I was born during the war years, and things, we were liberated by the Canadians in April the 12th, 1945, and things were pretty tough, as people can relate to the Ukraine, of being under, in a war zone. It was tough, and we saw as kids far too much that we should not have seen. And so the first time that I really talked about it, I got had the honor of getting the honorary doctorates of laws from the University of Northern British Columbia in 2019, and had to then do a presentation in front of about 600 people or so. I talked about it then, that part. It's actually online, and so I felt I had an obligation to talk about it, and I do that now more frequently and obviously then I decided to write a book about it last year, and it's coming out in July the 8th, really, and should be in the bookstores on the 15th.
Perfect, I'll look for it.
Yeah. So now, that being said, where do you go from here?
To be perfectly frank, I'm not sure. I have promised my team and my board that I will get this project to the finish line and get our renovations done and the building opened, and then I need to take a bit of a break because I need some time.
Which is well deserved, right? Mm-hmm. So,
once I've had that break and a chance to get my feet back under me after we're reopened, then I think
Yeah.
I can decide what I want to do next. You know,
Yeah.
I've been really interested in the idea of living off grid and trying a subsistence lifestyle. I mean, it seems very different than anything I've done to this point, and certainly for a downtown Toronto girl, it could be a challenge.
Yeah.
But John is so capable and so embedded in the north and in the wilderness that I think between us we might have a shot at it. So maybe I'll try something like that.
Yeah. Interesting. We'll be watching you.
It'll be an adventure. It'll always be interesting. I guarantee you, whatever direction I
I'm
go,
sure it
it'll
will
be
be too.
entertaining.
I will get you a book. I will sign it for you. Do you have one of my other books?
I do. You signed one for me, and you gave me one for the museum collection. It's
Okay.
been accessioned, so you're stuck in the museum now, John.
I love it. So I will get you one as soon as the other one comes out. And Tracy, it was my pleasure.
Pleasure
Thank
to
you.
talk again. Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Take care.